G'day, I'm Stephen Page from Provan Family and Fertility Lawyers. Thank you for joining me in the Australian Family and Fertility Law podcast. Today, and this is recorded in June 25, I'm giving an update on surrogacy in Mexico. Certainly surrogacy in Mexico appears less risky, believe it or not, than undertaking surrogacy in the United States. That's not something that I think I would ever have said prior to the current election of Donald Trump. And what have we seen with him? We've seen the executive order about birthright citizenship. It's stayed for the moment. I'm told by my American friends it's not going to be upheld, but wait and see. And we've seen also that the exchange rate with the United States has bounced around like a child on a trampoline, which is most concerning. Mexico is an interesting country. It has 120 million people, the largest Spanish-speaking country. It is a federation with 31 states, and most of those states have no laws regulating surrogacy. The Supreme Court, in two decisions, has said, in effect, that the intended parents are the parents, and that surrogacy is a protected attribute, so surrogacy can't be prohibited, but it certainly can be regulated. Care must be taken with undertaking surrogacy in Mexico. There are a couple of dozen surrogacy agencies there and a number of clinics. I've certainly seen embryo mistakes made in Mexico, as we've seen recently in Australia with Monash IVF. And I've seen stories of exploitation of intended parents in Mexico. I've never seen that actually happen with Australians. I've had clients go to Mexico in small numbers since 2014, and I've not seen that happen. But what I have seen happen is that there's not been clarity about who is a parent at the end of the process, that if you have a couple undertaking surrogacy in Mexico, then you may end up with one on the birth certificate and one not, with the surrogate being the other parent. Done carefully in Mexico, both are named on the birth certificate, but that will depend on what agency you go to, what lawyer you go to, and where in Mexico you do your surrogacy journey, because it varies state by state. So one must take great care with surrogacy in Mexico. It's best to get good legal advice at this end. In my case, I have suffered infertility. I'm a dad through surrogacy. But most importantly, from this aspect, aside from having had clients go to Mexico since 2014, I have advised in over 2,000 surrogacy journeys for clients throughout Australia and at last count 39 countries overseas. And it's also important to know where your embryos or genetic material are. There can be issues getting them out of Australia, but there are also issues getting them into Mexico. Mexico has unique regulations that require the importation of genetic material to be approved by the government, and that requires a fee to be paid to the government of about $3,000 when you add your brokers, $3,000 Australian when you add your broker costs in, and it can take between a couple of months or more to obtain that approval. Done right, it shouldn't hold anything up. Done badly, it'll hold everything up considerably. So it's important to be very careful in undertaking surrogacy in Mexico and have all your ducks in a row. And it's also important to make sure that you don't commit an offence concerning commercial surrogacy. So that we're clear, if you live in Queensland, New South Wales or the ACT, it can be an offence in engaging in commercial surrogacy overseas. In New South Wales, for example, you could be liable to a fine of up to $110,000 or 2 years imprisonment or both. In Queensland, a fine or up to 3 years imprisonment. And if you're from Northern Territory, South Australia, Western Australia, you could be committing an offence overseas to do with commercial surrogacy. And although I haven't seen it done by way of adoption in Mexico, if the process of parentage establishment is by way of adoption, then wherever you live in Australia, you could be committing an offence. So get good legal advice first. I'd say don't go and search the internet to look for surrogacy agencies in Mexico or lawyers, because you may think you've got a good one, but you may not have a good one. Ask at this end first by someone who is disinterested, who has no interest at all other than your best interests, namely a lawyer. Thank you for watching and listening. I'm Stephen Page from from Page Provan Family and Fertility Lawyers, and this has been the Australian Family and Fertility Law Podcast.